นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังคุณุตตรังอุปัชฌายังนะมาสามิ Some years ago, Ajahn was living in a forest in western Thailand, and he received from me a copy of a rather wonderful book, as I remember. It's called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time, which dealt with a rather special young boy in England who had Asperger's. And the title of this book was a reference to another book which was written some 100 years before, called The Hound of the Baskervilles. It's a Sherlock Holmes story. Can everyone hear me? I'm not used to speaking without a microphone. So The Hound of the Baskervilles. Now the key plot point of The Hound of the Baskervilles and the means by which Sherlock Holmes catches the villain is that on the night that the terrible crime takes place, the dog doesn't bark. And so Sherlock Holmes deduces from this that the dog must have known who it was, that it was the owner, and so on. So why am I telling you all this? First, I just wanted to give Ajahn a little bit of a shock at the start of the out of a sense of naughtiness. The second reason is that I find very useful and interesting exercise, and one which you have to put some effort into, recognizing what's not present rather than what is present. So in The Hound of the Baskervilles, this was embodied in this rather brilliant piece of deduction. Everyone else was looking for what did happen, and he picked up on what should have happened and didn't. So when we look at our practice in whatever area we choose to do so, then it's useful not to dwell only on the results, the changes that take place, but with what does not result, what might have resulted otherwise, but hasn't. In the practice of sila, an example would be the consumption of alcohol. I'm sure this is a purely academic discussion for most of you sitting here tonight, but bear with me here. The people who consume alcohol will often point to, rather wisely, to something that doesn't happen, meaning, in particular, they don't get violent and aggressive, they don't get drunk, don't do terrible things. Therefore, it should be okay. So, in this case, they're halfway there. They have an appreciation of something which might happen but hasn't, but it's incomplete because the other side of this reflection are what are the good things, the anisong that should or could arise from not drinking which don't arise through drinking. One of the less well-known meditation subjects is that of silanusati, the recollection of sila. And it is, in many ways, can be a shortcut. That's the word, it's very popular. It's a shortcut to samadhi. If we can recollect the 5 precepts and reviewing our conduct over a period of time, the longer the better, seeing that we've been able to keep all 5 precepts impeccably, a great deal of positive emotion can arise, joy can arise, a very wholesome kind of pride can arise. And the joy and that wholesome sense of pride and achievement can suppress the hindrances in a way that sometimes the meditation on the breath, for instance, might not be able to achieve. So sila, keeping precepts well, wisely, provides the foundation for a very effective and much overlooked meditation practice, one of the discursive meditation practices. So if we consider excessive mental activity as an addiction, 2 ways of dealing with addiction. You just cut it off right from this moment on, never again. Or you say, well, I'll gradually reduce my addiction step by step, little by little, until nothing remains. And so with the addiction of thought and addiction to memory and imagination, fantasy and so on, then you can either concentrate or incline your mind towards the breath, which is like just trying to give up immediately, or you can use a discursive meditation where you're replacing undisciplined, scattered thoughts with a disciplined, systematic review of precepts one by one. And if you have particular examples in which it was very difficult to keep a precept, and you are able to sustain your wholesome volition and to refrain from breaking the precept, that very much strengthens the power of the meditation. A word about sila here. I often talk about Buddhism as an education system rather than a belief system, and that therefore sila is to be understood rather differently in Buddhism than in other religions, that sila is seen as an integral part of the overall spiritual development, and that it is characterized by the fact that it has to be voluntary. We have to voluntarily accept certain boundaries for our actions and speech, and then through being able to conduct ourselves in such a way that we do not transgress those boundaries, we feel a sense of self-respect, self-esteem, and we reduce much of the mental distress and anxiety and so on, which can undermine our meditation. There is a teaching of the Lord Buddha in which he states that someone who keeps the precepts purely meaning does not transgress these precepts which he or she's voluntarily undertaken, and on account of that purity considers himself or herself superior to someone who doesn't keep precepts, that person is not a wise person, he's a fool. So this is an added criteria for sila in the Buddhist context. Even if the Buddha says that the very act of feeling superior on account of your sila sullies your sila. So sila is the wisest way of living in the world. It has the most salutary effect on your mental state. It's helping to produce the kinds of mental states and attitudes which will be of most use to you in your meditation, and is serving on a certain level to reduce the power of the negative mental states which usually bedevil your efforts to train your mind. So sila is sometimes, or in the framework that I use in my work in education, we divide it into your relationship to the material world and to the social world. So in that formulation, we use the word sila more specifically with regard to social relationships and physical development or bhavana for relationship to the material world. And there's a recognition that these different elements have to work in harmony. So there's no discontinuity between the attitudes you have towards rest, exercise, food, the way that you relate to your telephone, to your computer, to your possessions. These are all on a spectrum. They're all intimately connected with your application of meditation techniques. So giving care and attention to all these areas is helping to create a momentum. So bringing attention to how much rest you need and experimenting, finding that out, making sure you've exercise, eating just the right amount. Just the right amount is the golden mean. So if you eat too much, then you weigh too much. If you eat like a sparrow, you'll weigh too little. And if you eat just the right amount, you'll be on the middle way. And the middle way is the way that the Buddha taught all of us to conduct our lives in every single area. Not too much, not too little. Now, the attitude that the Buddha recommended was the attitude of the student of life. And in the meditation practice itself, I think it helps a great deal to consider the meditation practice as an exploration and as a study. And if we consider meditation as an effort to achieve a certain state of mind or the accumulation of certain special experiences, then we're still looking at meditation in a very worldly way. And then we get the counter this very common phenomena of people rather tragically seeking to recreate and re-experience certain meditation experiences from 6 months ago, a year ago, or even 10 years ago. So Ajahn Chah would say things like, if you're peaceful, know that you're peaceful. If you're not peaceful, know that you're not peaceful. If you're peaceful, learn from peace. If you're not peaceful, learn from not peace. So this, I think, takes away a lot of sort of tension and gaining attitudes in meditation without, at the same time, removing interest and enthusiasm for practice. So we're learning all the time, and although some mental states are less enjoyable to learn about than others, in the long run, we may well benefit more from being willing to look and to learn. So we can, in this way, there's more of a seamless relationship between meditative practices, meditation practices, and daily life. And we're just doing the same thing, but in the meditation practice, we are reducing the amount of distraction, and we're practicing life skills in a very focused way. One analogy which I'm fond of using is that if we compare the mind to a moving light, and let's imagine that the background of this moving light is full of many different colors and hues, and is itself in movement. To track the movement of that small point of light across a very complex background is possible but difficult. One thing that will help us to do that is if we spend a certain amount of time regularly following the movement of a small point of light against a white background or a very simplified background. And so we attain a certain fluency and habituation through that much simplified effort, which then enhances our ability to do the same thing in more complex environments. So this is a kind of understanding of meditation practice, where we're learning to be with the mind, to learn from the mind, to understand the mind by creating an artificial situation in which sense contact is radically reduced, and allowing us to see the arising and passing away of mental objects as mental objects, to see memory as memory, to see thought as thought, imagination as imagination, and so on. It's just that. It's nothing more, nothing less. And sense of interest in learning and understanding is key here, and it's a refreshing kind of desire, not a draining and an agitated kind of desire, and one which is sustainable. So even in the early stages, meditation where your mind's wandering a lot, what happens when you bring your mind back to the meditation object? Often meditators will complain or become discouraged that just wasting their time tried to meditate on an object, and next thing they know, mind's gone here and gone there, and then they brought it back, and then before very long it's gone again, and how hopeless I am, etc. But I would suggest look at that whole process again and say, what is that moment, when you realize that you've become distracted? That's a moment of enlightenment. That's a moment of awakening. You've woken up. And then you bring your mind back, and that's a moment of renunciation. So you're training in just on that very basic initial level. You're learning to wake up to your experience and to realign yourself with your considered aims and objectives. And the more that you do it and you apply yourself, the more easy it becomes. Some time ago in a study at a leading music school, I think in America, they divided these pupils who were already quite gifted into three groups: the sort of very gifted genius types, the middle group, and the less gifted. And in order to see the relationship between inherent, inborn genius and practice, idea being someone who's just naturally gifted, doesn't have to do so much practice, and the less gifted have to do more practice to make up for their lack of inherent giftedness. The actual results were exactly the opposite. The more gifted the pupil, the more time they spent practicing. And they came up with this theory called the 10,000 hours theory, which is if you want to be really fluent and really adept at anything of any substance, you have to be willing to make a commitment of 10,000 hours. So if you've been meditating and say, I've been meditating for weeks now, or months now, and not every day, but quite often, or even if you've been meditating morning and evening every day, rather than looking at the calendar, if you have to have some kind of quantitative assessment, look in terms of 10,000 hours. And take the long-term view, 10,000 hours of study. So the interest and that willingness to look, and going back to this, like the threefold training or the four kinds of bhavana, the bhavana development of one's relationship to the physical world, the social world, the emotional development, the wisdom development, and how they affect each other, then the more that one is willing to observe, then the more one's wisdom and one's confidence and faith in the Buddha's teaching matures. There's a lot of discussion and dissension even in Buddhist circles about samatha and vipassana. People get very heated about this. So I'd like to offer a thought here. Let's say in the case of someone who meditates on the sensation of their breath, for instance, or gives no great time or focus to particular so-called vipassana techniques, but his mind becomes very calm, extremely peaceful and clear and bright and solid. On withdrawing on the mind, emerging from that state, that person may well experience a radical reassessment of their life, of their goals, of their activities, of their sila. Things which had formerly seemed very important may well not seem very important at all. The relationship between sila and inner restraint and the ability to focus the mind will become clear, experientially clear, rather than as an idea. There's a natural shrinking away from gross negative emotions, an appreciation of more subtle states of mind. So many important changes in one's view of life, one's goals in life, the way one lives one's life, can usually will result from an experience of inner peace. So this is not enlightenment or anything, but I'm bringing this up as an example to show how problematic is this clear-cut distinction between samatha and vipassana, and the idea that vipassana techniques alone bring wisdom, because I think many people become much wiser in terms of their understanding of the nature of happiness and pain and suffering, and the cause of suffering and the end of suffering, through experience of states of mind free of hindrances. So it's something which needs to be known and experienced and studied. I find that as I've practiced on this, I developed a sort of benign schizophrenia. So I'm not necessarily suggesting you should establish this as a goal. I'm just sort of sharing this with you. It's very pleasant. So this student, this observing mind, is experienced like an elder brother, and the personality, my personality, is experienced as a younger brother. And so constantly I'm thinking, that's really kind of cute, that's really kind of stupid. And it's just, if you have a younger sibling, you know how that feels, where you kind of like feel this sense of affection and interest and concern. But it's it's your younger brother or your younger sister, and it's a very kind of warm family kind of feeling. It's there is this knowing, but it's constant. Oh, that's interesting. That's not so wholesome, or that's very wholesome. And one of the things to really develop in practice, what I am advocating here now, is recognizing and appreciating the small victories, the small areas of progress in your practice, both the things that have appeared, the wholesome qualities that have appeared through your practice, and those qualities the negative qualities which no longer appear. So returning to the point I made it right at the beginning of the talk, and connecting this with the practice of samadhi bhavana, is when the meditator recognizes the absence of the hindrances, jhana factors of piti and sukha arise. And the Buddha counseled monks and meditators generally to constantly check or regularly check for the presence and the absence of both negative and positive qualities. And when you see, for instance, you're in a situation in which somebody says something hurtful or something unpleasant occurs, and the mind is completely unfazed by it. And then that's a wonderful opportunity to develop this inner joy. You say, how wonderful it is. 6 months ago, a year ago, if that had happened, I would have been upset and agitated and hurt and peaked and noijai for hours or days. And now I feel quite okay. I'm not. Isn't that wonderful, that thing that's happened within me through, not through any mystical, marvelous thing other than through having created the causes and conditions, through a commitment and sincerity of effort, following the Buddha's path. So the spiritual life and this whole path is difficult, and it's tough. A lot of disappointments. So you need to be able to be bringing up and being more and more your own refuge. And this is bringing up these positive qualities that have arisen and the absence of negative qualities. And also at the same time maintaining this wise awareness that these things are unstable and unreliable, and the absence of negative qualities in the present doesn't mean they'll necessarily be absent in the future, and the presence of positive qualities now doesn't mean that they're going to be present in the future. So there's constantly these right efforts. One of the things about this elder brother, younger brother thing is I notice how, every time I come to the West or to America, the language slightly changes and new words and phrases become, and some, for some reason, some I really like and some I really detest, and there's no real rhyme and reason to it. It's just this thing my mind has, this kind of cute thing. So there's one thing that really makes me cringe, I don't think people do it so much now, when people say hello, and then do you know what I mean? Say hello this and hello that. I cringe, but the one that I really, really like still is when people say so not this and so not that. I just find it so charming. I mean, it just makes me smile. It gives me pleasure every time I hear it. But the latest one I've heard, I've been travelling around America the last few days, just hear it all the time, is "it is what it is." That's a new one. And so I was thinking, what do I feel about that one? What does my mind... And I was thinking, I'd have the Buddhist take on that one. It is what it is right now. Yeah, that would be the Buddhist version. Yeah, it is, but it is what it is. It doesn't mean, therefore, you just have to take it and do the best with it. It is what it is now because of all the causes and conditions that have led up to it being this way. But it doesn't necessarily have to be this way in the future because we have a certain influence and power to affect the causes and conditions that are pertaining to this particular thing. So, being in the present moment, I call being in the classroom. If you adopt my kind of presentation or suggestion that Buddhism is ultimately the supremely comprehensive education system, then where does this education take place? Where is the classroom? The classroom is the present moment. So being in the present moment is not the goal, it's just a necessary condition for this education to take place. And the emotional condition, primarily that of equanimity. So being equanimous in the present moment is again not the goal, but it's an important part of the process leading to development of wisdom. So before you can assess any situation accurately, before you can weigh the evidence, before you can act effectively, you have to be able to put the mind into an equanimous mental state. So it's not like now you're not suffering about this anymore, now your mind is on an even keel, you've done the work. That's just the first stage, Then after that, the wisdom faculty takes over. Should you say something? Should you do something or not? Should you just be patient and endure, or should you apply yourself in some way? So the ability that one of the life skills, I'm saying we're training ourselves, is sustaining this relaxed alertness, relaxed wakefulness in the meditation process in order to be able to sustain that more and more effectively in daily life, to have the ability to be awake and aware and equanimous with regard to sense contacts and various experiences, not as an end in itself, but in order to facilitate in the abandonment of the unwholesome, the development of the wholesome, and the purification of the mind. So this afternoon I was speaking to a group and saying, the way I look at practice, I look at it in these 4 areas. I didn't actually say this afternoon, I'll say this now. There's 4 areas of the physical development, the sila development, our relationship to the physical world, relationship to the social world, the emotional development, primarily the abandonment of negative emotions, the development of positive emotions, and the wisdom development, to be applying the Buddha's teachings in these 4 areas in terms of the framework given by the Buddha, called by him samavayama, or right effort. So in those 4 areas, physical, sila, citta, panya, development, the challenge that one takes upon oneself is how to protect the mind against unwholesome dhammas that have not yet arisen. In the case that unwholesome dhammas have arisen, it's the most skillful way to reduce or eliminate them. What wholesome dhammas in this particular area of life have not yet arisen, which may arise, and which wholesome dhammas have arisen and need to be cared for and developed further. So you can I apply those 4 efforts in those 4 areas. It's a sort of systematic way of looking at practice, and one that recognizes and upholds the primacy and the necessity for formal practice, but yet weaves it into and integrates it into an understanding of one's whole life as a Buddhist, as a student. Arahant is the aseka pugala, the graduate. Everyone else, except the Arahant, is student, not yet graduated. So this is our study and our effort. And let me give you an example of just brings to mind. Like if you're in a car or you're in a city I mean, it's really great fun. You sit there, and if you're not driving and you're like me and you're just a passenger and you have this kind of luxury of just looking out the window, or even if you're driving, do that, is trying to wish some good thing for every person that you can see. I mean, you can do it just with "May you be happy, may you be happy," and that's already very good practice. But you can make it more fun and more filling by trying to think of something more specific. I do this in all kinds of contexts. There's a little boy in the village in Ubon, and he's been coming out to put food in the monk's bowl since he's a very small child, like 2 years old, and he's very, very diligent, and he loves to say bhat, and he goes to the monastery now, and this little boy's got really big ears, and he's just started to grow up after I left Wat Nanachat. But whenever I go back, when he puts food in my bowl, I always wish, "May no one ever tease you about your ears." And so that's a kind of example of a kind of specific thing. You see really fat people, you say, "May you lose 20 pounds in weight," or and I see young women walking along on these really high heels, and "May you never fall off your high heels." Or somebody else, "May you have the wisdom to choose sensible footwear." And you can make it really fun and be really creative, but just trying to find some really kind of specific good thing for each passing person that you've never met before. And it's just a very simple, practical means of developing, protecting. If you're doing that, then you're not getting distracted by all the colours and the advertising, or you're not looking at that person's dress and think, "Oh, I'd like one like that," or feeling, looking at members of the opposite sex with more unwholesome. You're substituting unwholesome dhammas. You're protecting the mind against unwholesome dhammas. You can remove unwholesome dhammas through this practice. You're creating and you're sustaining wholesome practices. So this is also meditation, taking responsibility for your mind, moulding your mind, working with your mind, massaging your mind, disciplining your mind in whatever situation you find yourself. And what happens is that you develop a really strong appreciation for goodness, even in its most mundane expressions. And you find, I would say, this is a teaching given one of my teachers, that if you're practicing correctly, how do you know? You know because before you started practicing, so many things make you suffer and so few things make you happy. And as you practice, if you're practicing correctly, what you should find is fewer and fewer things make you suffer and more things make you happy. That's one of the best criteria or a simple test to see whether you're on the Buddha's path or not. So things like getting up early in the morning, and what a torture, or sweeping and manual work and things that people, you think how would a chore like that be a source of happiness? But as you see the importance, the centrality of your state of mind and your attitude and your quality of attention and your respect and interest for whatever might be your responsibility at any given time, you see how it's that more than anything else which affects the quality of your life. There's this great sense of confidence and freedom. You have to be a victim, a prey of anything. Nobody can make you unhappy. People can create conditions where it's very conducive for you to feel unhappy, but nobody has the power to control your mind. People can oppress you physically, certainly, but in the end, dukkha is always caused by tanha. So if you're suffering, you say, where is the tanha? Right now. If there's no tanha, there's no craving, there's no attachment, there can't be any suffering. So irrespective of what this person has said and done, or this situation, in the end, if there's mental suffering, there has to be craving. This is taking the Buddha's teachings on trust, and taking them as your the lens, the framework through which you look at life. So in this study of life, learning from life, we have the Buddha's teachings as tools, and things that we don't grasp onto as dogmas, but we learn how to make use of through a constant and consistent practice and application. So I put somebody to sleep already. Obviously not being quite as entertaining as I hoped. Thank you for your patience, and I very much enjoy my visits to Abhayagiri, without wanting to be a flatterer. I must say this is my favourite monastery, and if I didn't enjoy my own company so much, I wasn't such good friends with myself, and ever considered living in a community again, this is probably where I would apply for a place on the floor somewhere. But as it is, I'm very appreciative of the kindness and hospitality, and it's meeting old friends, and almost everyone here has spent time with in Thailand, of course, especially Ajahn Pasano, and gives me great joy and pleasure to be able to visit him and all of you. So I would like to end my talk at this point. Thank you.